Now, my next guest stepped out of the kitchen and onto his bike to take part in a 200-kilometre cycle on Saturday morning, all in aid of Console. Celebrity chef Derry Clarke set off with hundreds of other cyclists at 6 a.m. from Selbridge, taking the old road to Galway before arriving later that evening. This is all part of his training ahead of the Paris to Nice 700k cycle again for Console in autumn. Derry, you're very welcome. You were also joined in studio by Denis O'Connor of Console. Derry, you're looking very slim and very trim and very fit.
Thanks, David. Thanks very much. Actually, I feel tired listening to that much on the weekend. It was brilliant, actually. Console deserves so much credit to organise that. And the people who did it, 250 people from around the country, left Selbridge, as you said, at 6 o'clock in the morning. We got into Galway at 6 in the evening. It was quite an incredible day, actually. Great support teams. The whole thing went really well out of hitch. And
tell me, have you been in training for this for quite some time?
Yeah, well, I'm one of those, what they call them, a mammal, middle-aged man in lycra.
Don't tell me about them. Every single on a Sunday morning, anywhere around Enniskerry, Bray,
I know.
The place is full of your tribe.
That's me. You know, I never thought I'd be one of those, but I've joined the club.
Have you got the full sort of fluorescent lycra thing going on?
No, I kind of went. I went a bit more conservative. I kind of went for the dark colours, greys and blacks.
Yes,
I think the reds, yellows, and blues should be for the young guys.
The luminous kind of tadpole look.
I think us older ones should really be a bit more discreet. Yeah.
But so you're training for this big one, this 700k cycle.
Yeah, that's the big one. All right, that's in September. 95 cyclists do that, and they've done it over several years. And of course, about 17, 18 charities involved in that. So we have different teams. The team I'm involved with. There's 10 of us on the team. Ross Lewis from Chapter 1, Warren Massey from Jerry Street Buildings Restaurant, Kevin Hugh from China Sichuan, and a few other chefs. So it's kind of like a mixture of a team, and we're in training hard. And it's funny, after cycling is addictive. You got to train twice a week and maybe do a gym because it's a long cycle. France has a lot of mountains to cross, so you have to get fit, lose weight, and the idea of it is to raise money, of course. And like I say, if you go on to online, you see the Paris to Nice, and you see all the teams there and the different charities. So even if not Console is your charity, there's other charities there you could pick.
So it's open to anybody who feels that they want to go and raise money for whatever.
Correct.
Now, Toby, before your son Andrew's death, had you heard of Console?
Funny enough, I did. And funny enough, actually, Pat Kenny, who's on holidays, and myself did a cycle with them. A short one of 20k, actually. I said that was more sensible. The 20k cycle is much better, actually, by the way, Dennis. You must remember that. But anyway, we did that.
Sure, I'll do a 20k.
Yeah, so,
well, maybe not straight away, but I might do one.
And it was a great one, actually, up the canal and back down to Dublin again. I thought it was quite sensible. But no, I did actually. But I must say I did, but I didn't because it didn't affect me directly. And you kind of won't happen to me scenario. Like anything, really. So... But within a year, I needed them, so I knew about them, which was great. So awareness was the thing I kind of realised about it, that people out there should realise there is a charity, countrywide, nationwide, that are there to help you, support you. I mean, Dennis will probably give details on that, but it's a great thing to have. And their services are being used more and more, and it's expanding pretty rapidly over the country at the moment. And
can you tell me about the sense of isolation when you lose a loved one by suicide? And what Console does and how it helps you get over things, over certain very, very dark periods.
Yeah, well, I suppose, when initially it happens, you think you're the only one who's suffering that. But of course, I've realised there's far, far too many families in Ireland going through what we went through. And unfortunately, there'll be families that will go through that, who are listening today, don't realise it, but they're going to face it. And hopefully they don't, obviously. But it's a very, very hard moment in time to face up to and to move on from, actually. Because suicide is something that is completely different, a different grief than anything else, if that makes sense. Because always that big, it's a big word, actually. A big word is called why, really, I think. And but when you go to association like Console, they have experience. Their counsellors are trained. It's structured. After you say, they realise what you're saying. They know what you're going through. So that's the whole thing. That's the key, really, isn't it? And very hard to move on from something like that. When you don't move on, actually, you kind of live with it.
And Console, it's a constant helpline.
Oh, it is. It's 24/7.
And Dennis, how did you involve yourself with Console, and why?
About 5 years ago, Paul Kelly approached me. I live in Wexford, and he approached me to set up a centre in Wexford. So in 2010 we set up a centre in Wexford for families who have been bereaved by suicide. So that's the first time I became involved. Initially, when Paul asked me, I thought it was too big a job. I didn't really want to. But then when we actually looked at the statistics and the figures of people who needed help, so that's the first reason I got involved, basically because Paul is such a fine fellow, a gentleman himself, and everyone wants to be around him. He's very positive, he's very proactive, he's opened console centres, you know, when everything else in the country was closing down, running against the tide. So that's the reason I got involved, and the reason I've stayed involved is because I see what we do. I see the benefits of people who come to us looking for help. I've seen people who come, basically Console was set up around the whole area of postvention to help families who had been bereaved, but more and more calls are coming to us now for the area of prevention. And as Derry already said, we're really about awareness, about saying that there is help out there, that there's no need for anyone to suffer in silence. We have a 24-hour helpline that we've relaunched, a new helpline, 1800 247 247. It's the simplest number in the world to remember, and even if every youngster or somebody belonged to them just put that number into their phone, because they might not need it but their friends might need it, and it's available, and the people on that, we're not a listening service, we actually provide positive intervention, because the people on our helplines are all trained. And then within our centres, as Derry has said, all our people working in our centres are all trained professionals who are trained to the highest.
Can you tell me about, let's say if you're a parent and you have a child and you begin to worry, but you're not too sure because nobody's equipped to deal with this in advance. Mm-hmm. What might they do, Denis? Let's say you're a parent and you feel that there's something going on inside, let's say your teenage daughter or son's head, and something sparks and you say, hold on a second.
Well, the first thing that, as a parent, we would engage with our children and show them that you honestly care, and point out the fact that they don't seem to be themselves. Is there something wrong? Is there a concern? Is there some way we can help you? And with most teenagers, they'll tell you, no, I'm grand, go away, I'm okay. But that's the worst thing that could happen. The best thing is that you could possibly make them think that, God, somebody has noticed something. And oftentimes then, when we're contact, we would say, well, your first port of call now is the GP, and let's see what's going on there. But unfortunately, sometimes there are no signs at all, that somebody is in distress, and this comes out of the blue. So we're...
Derry, you're nodding your head away here.
It does, yeah. No, Denis is quite right what he's saying there. I think it's smack on, but unfortunately, for us, and he was out of the blue, really, unexpected completely. I mean, in fact, if you had to ask me anything, my worries, when you have kids, you always worry about different things. You really do, traffic, going to town at night time,
who they're hanging around with.
Yeah, exactly. All these. Actually, and funny enough, the one thing I never even crossed my mind happened, which was, really, if I knew I know now, it would have made much difference, really. I don't think. So it was kind of just out of the blue, really. But as I said, I'm sure there are some signs there for some people.
Yeah, and if I'm saying to families there, if you pick up on these signs, because people are in some way sending out a signal that they need some kind of help. They may not have the language to tell you, but if we're a bit older, we might just spot something if the signs are there. But as I said earlier, not always. But if we do pick on, just let the person know that you care, and let them know that you're out for their best interest. And it's a difficult time now for young people, with exams and with media and with peer pressure and with everything. It's a tough time now.
I want to go on to the issue of social media, just looking at my own children and the world that they are living in now, and the obsessions and the 24 hours always on, and who said what to whom. And, this is something that when I was young, let's say you got into a scrap at school or something went wrong. So once you went home, the door was closed. Mm-hmm. The phone didn't ring. Whereas now I see them all night. Such and such said something to such and such, and she's, and it seems to me that this always on culture that they have could lead to small things becoming very, very big very quickly.
Well, you back on there. Kids from 14 to 18, and let's be honest, they are kids, still kids, are living a much more advanced lifestyle than we ever did with technology. And the peer pressure, as you say, but there's no downtime for them. Even I find technology is always there, and we are old enough to realise we just turn off our devices, turn them off, and we do sometimes, I do anyway, at night time, turn off my phone or turn off the laptop.
Absolutely, you need a bit of you time.
I think that's what we should do.
No noise.
I think we should do maybe a campaign about downtime. Turn off your phones, turn off your laptops, come offline.
Yeah,
get away from it. and get your own space. Maybe do something, do a hobby, because technology is living their lives at the moment. And I got to say, and it's been led by technology. Actually, everything's happening for them, everything. And I know there's like the pressure, the bullying online, peer pressure, image pressure. It's incredible. I don't know how to do it.
And also, Denis, usually the last person a teenager wants to talk to is their dad. The most uncool, the most irrelevant person in the world is the mum and the dad. Yeah. So this is where console comes in, because it's objective and it's different and it's professional. People know what they're doing.
Yeah, and the thing is, as a nation, as men, we're not good talkers, and we've always been behind the ball on that. And even to this day, men, and certainly my generation, were reared with, keep your head down, keep going, say nothing. And that whole process of helping people identify feelings and all at a very early age, and be able to talk about what upsets me. I'm a bit sad today because, and normalise it and normalise the talk, and nobody judges anyone. But Derry came on to a great good point there, and I was talking to a group only last week, and I was talking about being still. Being still. We have lost the ability to be still as a nation.
In terms of we're constantly interrupted by this, that and the other, and constantly concerned about 5 or 6 things going on in the head at the same time.
Everything. So in essence, I know my generation, we were reared where we sat around the kitchen table and we talked, and the radio wasn't on, the television wasn't on, there were no mobile phones. I'm not saying I'm against technology, because we have to move with the times, but it has its place. But I think we've nearly lost the plot as regards being full on 24/7, that we need to step back a bit, be still, see what's going on in our world, other than being so busy that we haven't time to recognise what's going on.
Derry, what would you say, let's say, to parents listening this morning who maybe that little bit of concern about their child? What would you say to them?
Exactly what Denis just said there actually is talk, because talk is good. There's no doubt about that. I think, and in a reasonable, families. The best thing actually is, I think, about families, well, when my kids were younger, was the chats we had
around dinner.
Yes,
the slagging.
Yes, and that's another thing we kind of lost a bit, is eating together as families. I know that family lives have gone so busy now, and people have different times, but it's always great seeing families eat together, because they always say families eat together, stay together. Is that correct? But I think, and also, as you said quite rightly, teenagers don't want to talk to their parents about their problems, because and don't like to talk to their friends either, peers. So a phone line is good, 24/7 phone line, and of course it's in confidence.
Yeah,
those calls are in confidence. There's no one, it's direct.
Which is absolutely crucial for the teenagers involved. But Derry, can you tell me? I mean, obviously, on Saturday, you met up with all sorts of people who have all sorts of stories. How not ubiquitous, but how likely is it, or common, that a family that thinks everything's going well, that thinks there's no problems, and then suddenly, out of the blue, which exactly what happened to you with Andrew, when you were talking to the people on Saturday, were there all sorts of stories that, again, the parents had no idea?
Most had. Every story was different. That's for sure. That's one thing you learn. Everyone's different, and every story is different. Unfortunately, and it's not just in Ireland, it's kind of a worldwide thing, there is a stigma still to mental health and suicide, and there's no getting away from that, unfortunately. There's something about it, I don't know why, really. We have this thing, you get a broken arm, that's okay. Something in your head is not right, not okay. It's difficult, I think. I think we start to be more aware about it. I think talk more about it as a nation, really. It's the young people in Ireland are more likely, have more chance of dying by suicide than by car accident.
That's an extraordinary statistic.
It really is. I mean, we go by road safety.
And you look at the amount of money that is put into official road safety ads, road safety. I mean, and rightly so. But that's an extraordinary statistic.
It is really. I mean, Denis, I have figures there.
Well, when you just mentioned road safety there, if we were to look back 10 years ago, in the region of 450 people died by suicide, and the same number of people were killed in road traffic accidents. But because of very, very positive action around the whole area of road safety, and because of huge investment of funds, the numbers of people who were killed on our roads have been reduced by half in the space of 10 years, from 450 to thankfully under 200 last year, and maybe a little bit more. But it just proves a point that if someone goes at something seriously, and it was done, the road traffic people went at it seriously, put huge resources, huge money, and the numbers reduced, were cut by half in the space of 10 years.
So in terms of suicide, what would you like from Console to see done officially? Because what we're talking about here is volunteer work, is unofficial work, is people saying, I'm going to do that cycle, I'm going to raise money myself because this is my story. But at an official level, Denis, what do you think could be the beginning of this process to possibly match the success of road safety?
Well, just to quote you another figure, about 25% of our funding comes through the government, and people like Derry here go out and raise about 75% of the funding that it takes to keep Console going every year. So if you're asking me where's the starting point, well, a starting point is certainly more investment, because if people weren't out fundraising, they could be doing different work and more work. So that's probably a starting point. It's also that it needs to be raised highly on the agenda. Every now and again it pops up, but it's not a constant. So
speaking of constant, if I could just, is there any constant pattern that you see in Console's preventative work that is a pattern in children, or in teenagers who are contemplating taking their own lives? Do you see a pattern?
Well, you see, it's not always one single item that sort of is a catalyst. There's often several items going on in somebody's life, and the smallest thing in the world then can be the catalyst. But I would say to you, like, particularly with teenagers and all, it's oftentimes not being able to deal with the disappointment. Something going wrong in their lives. Maybe they have been reared in a culture of where everything was handy, everything was given. And I'm not saying this is in every case, but in a lot of the cases now, we have, as well-meaning parents, we have kind of reared a generation of people who didn't have maybe to work as hard as we did to get what we got. And sometimes it's very hard for those young people to deal with disappointments and knocks and setbacks if they haven't been used to them all their lives. That's only one kind of area that I see that comes up every now and again. But the whole area, I go back again to the social media, the peer pressure and everything like that. Like, somebody's reputation can be absolutely destroyed overnight. Absolutely. Overnight. We mentioned bullying there earlier, but we have a service, we have a text service there. So young people are into text messaging, but if somebody texts to our number 51444, a text from their own bedroom, they'll get a text back to say, is everything okay, or how can we help you?
That's 51444.
And just text help to this number, and that text will be answered by a trained person on the other side.
And are you seeing an appreciable rise in the amount of inquiries?
What's been really remarkable in the last while, because of the awareness that's been created for Console, more and more people are starting to access our services. And also, what I was saying to Derry outside, that we are now getting more calls from people, not so much from the people themselves, but from concerned family members, from people who work with people, from people who are teammates. So how do we raise the awareness of Console and the whole area of suicide? And Derry talked about it, that it's not spoken about and there's a stigma. But 20 years ago, people, when they spoke about cancer, they talked about the big C. Now,
yes,
now
that was definitely the description.
Now, so you have cancer. So maybe the more we talk about it, I'm not saying that we normalise it, but the more we talk about it, the more awareness that it's created, and the more help that people can actually come out and say, hey, do you know what, I don't feel well.
And Derry, in your darkest periods, what did Console, or the people you met through Console, how did that help you?
Sure, before I actually got to that, David, was actually on the cycle on Saturday. We had Finbar Walsh, Donald Walsh's dad from Kerry. He was on that cycle and we're chatting away. And of course, remember, Donald's last wishes were, people to try and live life, go through that, don't die by suicide, And in his area, it hasn't been a recorded suicide since.
There hasn't been?
Has not been, no. I asked Finbar on Saturday. So I think the Finbar would be great if that could be rolled out across the country. Wouldn't that be something? It'd be a nice honour and legacy for Donald Walsh, I think.
And it does show that teenagers can listen if the message is articulated.
But it came from their peers, Donald Walsh, which is a big difference, not from us, not from the adults.
But again, it must be very, very difficult, Derry, to get. I mean, again, I'm talking about the teenagers I know, to get one of them to stand up. Because the easiest thing, what I notice in teenagers, is this sort of copycat approach, that it's happening, and you see. Do you see that sort of pattern where one suicide can lead to another, can lead.
Yeah. Sometimes, David, and here's the thing about information. We can see sometimes maybe one or two or three in the same area, but an organisation like ours, we wouldn't know about it until 6 months or 8 or 9 months down the road. And what I'm saying is, if we had more or less up to date, real live register of where we could direct resources in if there was a suicide in an area, where if we knew that, because oftentimes the statistics we get are 6 months behind or maybe a year behind before we know. But if there's somebody out there that's vulnerable, and young people are impressionable, and young people do need role models, and as Derry has said there, when you're out there with a role model like that young man in Kerry who stood up and said, by the way, this doesn't have to happen, wonderful role model. We need more people around to be role models for young people, to stand up and say, look, there's another way.
But sorry, just one thing is also, I know we're talking about teenagers, which is really important, but suicide affects
adults as well. Yeah,
all generations. Let's say that too. You know, it's there. But the difference is, though, when you're an adult, you're a bit more wiser. You know, it's a different kind of choice, isn't it? Really.
Well, I suppose a bit of good news is that we've seen in the last while the rate of suicide in younger people. You mentioned earlier we had the fourth highest rate in Europe, but in Ireland it's starting to decrease. But what we have seen is there's an increase in the rate from people 45 to 55 or 6 years of age over the last couple of years.
On that note, which is again, so it's another issue, it's a totally different set of problems. We will definitely come back to this. Denis and Derry, thank you both very much indeed.